Welcome to America Now, Michael.
Hello, Bob. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? I know it's awfully early over there in South Africa.
Yeah, and I'm just glad you got hold of me because the numbers I gave you were incorrect, and I've been moving around a bit. I'm in a different location to where I was supposed to be. So.
But we did it. We intended it, at least on my end. I intended this we'd be able to get you and pull this off. We're doing it. So, Michael, first of all, let's talk about your case. You know, this is a huge piece of work, both physically at 1,100 pages and potentially legally. What made you decide to petition the court about the banking system and include the government in it?
Well, it was really a continuation of what started out as the bank harassing me for being behind on one or two payments, and so I made contact with the bank and trying to find out, okay, well, I wanted to know how much it would cost to settle the whole amount instead of just paying the arrears. And if I wanted to settle the whole amount, would I get a discount? Because, it's a 20-year home loan, and I know that they add interest to it and all that kind of stuff. So I was asking them certain questions and required certain documentation. And the documentation that I was asking for wasn't exactly very demanding. It was a simple statement, because by the time that they made contact with me, I hadn't received a statement for probably about a year. And I asked them for a statement, and then at that stage I was also starting to do some research and get information on what is often referred to as the free man movement and the sovereign man or sovereign person on the land movement, and the work that Winston Shrout in America is sharing with a lot of people about our sovereignty. And I just wanted to test the water and see what happens. And so I sent the bank a letter asking for specific documentations and a few questions, and they just didn't respond. In fact, they didn't just not respond. They blatantly said, so we're not sending you that information that you're requiring, like a settlement amount and a certificate of balance and an official statement signed by a senior manager of the bank. And I found that to be really suspicious and consistent with what I was finding out from various people that have been researching this whole legal system and how it connects with the banks and so forth. So I went a step further, discussing with some friends of mine that were doing the same kind of research, and they suggested, well, why don't you send a notarized letter to the bank and putting them on terms and get the law on your side, which I then did. I sent a notarized affidavit to the bank specifying the various contacts that I've had and the fact that I was unhappy with that they weren't responding and sending me the information I required, because they are obliged to give you all the information you require. There are very strict codes of conduct and laws that govern the operations of a bank, and that was just not forthcoming. I then followed it up with a second notarized affidavit, very short and to the point, putting them on terms and saying that I want the following information from them. And they still didn't respond. And eventually, after probably about 3 months of this going back and forth, I filed a lawsuit against them for a large amount of money based on my understanding of how banks operate and how I believe I was defrauded. And must talk about that, and because I believe a lot of people won't understand what I mean when I say that, how I was defrauded, because everybody's under the impression, but they loaned you money, they gave you money, and how can you say you were defrauded? And therein lies the trap and the deception, unfortunately. And at the same time that I actually opened a case against the bank, they then sued me, and I thought, well, I'm not going to lie down and take this. I'm going to go and defend myself in court, and that's where the whole process started about a year and a half ago. And I've since then been in court on 3 occasions, and that's in the Supreme Court in Johannesburg, which is the highest court in the country. The first occasion it was postponed, and both parties were sent back with being told that there was insufficient information provided by both parties. In fact, the bank was told that their affidavit and the person that structured their affidavit was not good enough, that the bank needed to go back and upgrade their affidavit and make it bring it in line with the requirements of an affidavit to argue against me. And it gave me an opportunity to go back and restructure my argument into a more stronger, substantial legal document, because at that stage I was just really on my own and putting down things in a layperson's voice, which just does not work in the courts, in the court system, with which I have a big problem in any case, and that's, I trust, will become a major issue in the Constitutional Court. And so after 3 appearances in the Supreme Court, and then the second two occasions, and I must also say that all 3 occasions my arguments lasted about 2 hours, and actually more than 2 hours, which has never happened before, because all these kind of cases normally last a few minutes before they get thrown out.
All right, Michael, hold your thoughts there. We will come back to this. All right, we will continue here on America Now with Michael Tellinger and the big case against the banks. Michael Tellinger is fighting for transparency in banking by challenging the global financial system in a landmark lawsuit. And he joins me this evening to talk about this case as well as solutions for the world. And Michael, when we left off, you were talking about your 3 appearances in the Supreme Court, that they had lasted a couple of hours or more each, but that evidently you were able to gather some information to be able to use now for this recent petition in the Constitutional Court.
Yeah, exactly. The interesting thing about this, Barbara, is that somehow, by some stroke of miracle, we've managed to get through the first 3 appearances. Although the judgment went against me, it gave me a good platform of an experience being in the court, representing myself, arguing myself in my own defense and against the bank. And here we're talking about the best lawyers money can buy. You can just imagine. Probably the highest paid lawyer in South Africa, in Johannesburg, together with an advocate, because in the High Court in South Africa, lawyers don't do the argument. The argument is done by lawyers that are slightly more, I guess, trained, if you want to use that word, but they're known as advocates. In England, they're known as barristers. And they're the guys that wear the black robes and belong to the boys' club, right?
Yes, exactly.
And they do all the bowing stuff to the bench, and the judge is called my lord, and they pray for a result and a judgment and all that kind of stuff. And you realize when you walk into that court that you walked into some sort of a Kabbalistic club that the ordinary person on the street has no idea about. And, when they walk out of the court, they walk backwards, bowing towards the judge, towards my lord. It's just unbelievable. When you first walk in there, it's a bit of a shock to the system. You say, well, what is this? The stuff that's going on behind our backs, ordinary citizens? They don't know anything about this stuff, this behavior. And
it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is quite scary that this goes on. But what was good was the fact that it gave me a real opportunity to experience that and to become comfortable with it and not be intimidated by it, because that really is what the biggest thing. Any person that walks off the street walks into that kind of environment. It is highly intimidating, and we don't know what our rights are. Well, our rights are very simple. You can walk into any court of law and defend yourself. You don't need a judge. You don't need a lawyer or a barrister or an advocate. You can stand up there and defend yourself and demand to be heard in your own language and in the own words that you speak. Because I'm not sure about the United States Constitution, but the South African Constitution certainly provides for that. And that doesn't happen either. They pretend to be listening to you, but they're not really listening to you. They speak a different language. They speak what is often referred to as legalese. And when we say something in English, we believe it means to be what we say it means. When they speak, they use legalese terms, and what we believe they are saying, it's something completely different.
Michael,
Michael,
do you think it's a form of purposeful intimidation that they do this?
I believe it most certainly has those kind of intentions, and I think once you start studying the relationship between banks and the legal system, you realize that they're inextricably entwined. And I think your American Winston Trout, who's a real expert on this. I think he's like the world guru on this maritime law, because that's really what it goes back to. It goes back to maritime law that has been implemented and really, what's the word, perpetrated on humanity without us knowing it. How we have become possessions of the government through pieces of paper and documents, and the terminology that's used, that we're just vessels, right? Every human being is a vessel, and that's why we carry passports and we come through the birth canal, and these are just a few basic words just to make people wake up and realize that what is going on in the legal system has got nothing to do with justice. It's got everything to do with control of humanity. And it's when I discovered that, and that started becoming very clear to me, that I realized, okay, I have an opportunity here to take on the banks since this legal action was started. And I could lie down and make it go away and pay a bit of money and make it go away. But otherwise, I could stand up and stand up for my rights and expose these hidden agendas and the convoluted legal system that is there to protect the banks. And this is where we are now, a year and a half down the road, nearly 2 years down the road, and a situation that I never expected, or in my wildest dreams. And a very exciting prospect to now. Remember that when you go to the Constitutional Court, it's no longer about the law or a court of law that deals with the bank's gripes against me. Now it is me being the applicant against the bank, claiming that a number of my constitutional rights have been violated. And in that process, highlighting the violations of my constitutional rights, and it's important for me also to mention those, is highlighting the areas where the banks break the laws, the various bills and acts, and with impunity, absolutely not being held accountable by the courts, by the judges, by the legal system, and they keep doing it, getting away with it every day. And not only do they get away with it, in the process of getting away with it, breaking the law on a daily basis, they are enslaving millions of people. They are putting people out of their homes. They are inflicting unimaginable financial tyranny and hardship on people, and this happens around the world. Every country has the same problems.
Yeah, they do. And when we come back, I'd like to talk more about this as well. This enslavement aspect, that money is the tool of enslavement. All right, we will continue this discussion with Michael Tellinger here on America Now. You know, most people are under the incorrect assumption that money's the consequence of human evolution, that it came from thousands of years of barter and trade, but that's not so true. Money is the tool of enslavement, and my guest, Michael Tellinger, is here tonight to help you understand this and how that it is a small number of families that control the supply of money worldwide. And Michael, when we left off, you were talking about how money is that tool of enslavement for humankind.
Yeah, exactly, and thanks for bringing that up, Barbara. As you said, most people are under the impression that we use money today because it came through a slow process of evolution where people were bartering and trading their geese for pigs, for maize, for rice, whatever, for services rendered over thousands of years. But that's not true. The first forms of money that we actually have, to actually find the first forms of money is in itself an interesting journey, because you get all kinds of lies and deception that you start encountering. But like everything else that we face in the world today, the source of everything seems to always go back to the Sumerians. And the first written language, not the first written language, but the oldest record of human history, let's put it that way, the oldest record of human history that we have been able to decipher and understand comes from the Sumerians, the Sumerian clay tablets and the cuneiform writing that people like Zechariah Sitchin, well, especially Zechariah Sitchin, has blessed us with his tremendous insight into that and understanding of a whole new history of humanity that previously was just seen as some fairy tale mythological story. Has turned out to be the more accurate version of what has happened to the human race over the especially the last 6,000 years, when we suddenly see the rise of the Sumerians around 4000 BC. And it is also there that we find the first forms of money in the form of clay tablets. Most historical books and research materials will point to the silver shekel as being the first form of minted money and coins that were minted. And that is not necessarily true. The Sumerians, just like everything else, were using clay tablets to write down the information, and also as the first form of payment tokens for various things. And it's important to understand where the Sumerians got their knowledge from. And in the Sumerian tablets, it tells us very clearly when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven. And it keeps repeating that, when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and kings and priests were appointed by the gods. And this is unfortunately the kind of area that you have to go to understand where the concept of leadership and kingship and priesthood appeared on planet Earth. That people didn't come together and decide, oh, well, we need a king. Let's appoint somebody amongst us as a king. That's not what happened. Kings were appointed by the gods, and priests were appointed by the gods and given advanced knowledge and information to control the people, and created in that historical moment, created the hierarchical structure of control and kingship and royalty. And it's the same royal political bloodlines that still run the world and control the world today. The same bloodlines that were appointed by the gods that the Sumerian tablets refer to. So and money was the same, belongs to the same sequence of events. The concept of money was given to those kings and those priests as a way to control humanity. And this is a really unbelievable story, because it changes the entire perception of who we are as a species, how money has been used to control us and enslave us, and how we are now facing probably the most severe abuse of that thing called money that we have ever faced as a species. Because if you don't have money today, this synthetically created thing, if you don't have money, you basically become a criminal. Because if you don't have money, you can't pay rent, you can't live somewhere, you can't buy property. And if you just occupy some land somewhere to live as a sovereign human being with an infinite soul, you're accused of occupying some land that either belongs to the government or to some other private individual, and you're trespassing. And if you don't have a job, you can't get money to buy bread and milk and sustain yourself. And if you don't have a job, you can't pay rent, and you can't pay electricity, and all the things that we are being charged for that should be free. And you start realizing how convoluted and beautifully structured the system is, because it is structured specifically for that, to control humanity and enslave us. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. So I guess you have an educated audience that is a lot more familiar with the alternative viewpoints than the mainstream radio stations. So hopefully they'll get it very quickly that it's, we talk about the biblical Elohim or the Sumerian Anunnaki, as Zechariah Sitchin made us aware of. And this whole enslavement and control came through the imposition or imposing of control on humanity from the Anunnaki and the Elohim, the biblical gods, and the creation of money as a tool of enslavement. And here we are. And the same, as I mentioned, the same bloodlines of kings and priests that go back thousands of years are still controlling the world, and among those bloodlines have now emerged the banking families. And those banking families are very powerful individuals. They run the governments, they control the legal systems, the way the legal systems and the laws that have been set up have been written, and those laws have nothing to do with our rights as human beings. That the common law really just has three principles: do not kill, do not steal, and conduct yourself honorably when you're dealing with others. The three fundamental cornerstones of common law. And common law is really the fundamental thing, that the law that all judges in all courts should uphold, and uphold our constitutional rights based on the common law, and expand common law for the greater benefit of the people. And that's unfortunately not what happens in the courts, well, especially not in South Africa, and I guess in any other country that doesn't happen either.
Yeah, it's not happening here either, Michael. It's true. Many of these families that you're talking about, what we call over here the 1%, the 99% should be heard, but it's the 1% that are controlling us. We are heading here to another break, so I want to continue talking about this, because as you, as a layperson, were able to petition the Constitutional Court, this is really a landmark case, because depending on the success and the outcome of this is really going to be interesting, because it could change the scenario for those global banking systems and families. All right, we will continue this discussion on the global banking system and the landmark fight against economic slavery with Michael Tellinger here on America Now. My guest tonight, Michael Tellinger, is fighting for our freedom against this tool of enslavement, money. He's got a lot of ideas about how we can solve this problem, how we can move towards unity, towards what we truly are, one. But we'll get to that in a while. First, we're going to go back to this landmark case of Michael's against Standard Bank of South Africa. And Michael, you were talking about how the courts are not really upholding the common law, the rights of the citizens. I'm going to let you pick it up there. And that's why you went ahead and filed suit as well against the Minister of Finance and the Reserve Bank.
That's right, Barbara, and thanks for bringing that up again, because this is such a big subject and one can very easily get lost in talking around in circles and not making progress.
Yes. We'll try to stay on track here, but you're right, there's too much here to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So what really happens is first of all, when I first arrived in court, just to tell you where my constitutional rights have not been upheld, I was treated with absolute zero respect or integrity by the judge. In fact, while I was waiting in courts, and I was the only person there, among probably 100 barristers or advocates, as we call them in South Africa, dressed in their black robes. There's a big court, and at the beginning of the week, the judge then, one of the senior judges, allocates the different cases to the different courts, and that's how it goes. So you learn all the stuff as you go along. But I arrived there to defend myself, and you stand around and you don't know how it works or what happens. And I went to the bathroom, and suddenly my case came up, and they would have just dismissed it out of hand, and I would have lost if one of my friends didn't jump up in court and said, "Hold on, he's here," and came looking for me in the bathroom. Wow. And I came back and stood there and said, "Yeah, no, I'm here to defend myself," and so forth. And the judge looked at me and said, "Okay," and then ignored me while he carried on having a long discussion with the advocate representing the bank, not asking me whether I agreed with the postponement or anything, any of the matters that they discussed. And then I was just, told, okay, well, the matter has been postponed for 2 weeks. I was never consulted by the judge to say, are you okay with it? He just had a conversation with an advocate of the bank, which is completely breaching all my rights. I should have been consulted by the judge and included in that conversation, not treated as an outsider and somebody who has absolutely no standing in the court. Then when it got to the second and third hearing, it was quite spectacular. The judge took at face value everything that the bank's lawyers wrote down. He did not question once any of the accusations or the alludements that are made against the bank. He didn't once cross-examine the bank on any of my arguments, completely dismissing and ignoring my arguments and simply accepting as everything that the bank said as being some gospel truth and is unquestionable and unchallengeable. Now, can you imagine that? It's like in a murder trial, the judge just taking the side of one person and believing everything they say, not challenging it or questioning it or asking the bank to explain anything that they had to say or anything they wrote down. That is completely and utterly unconstitutional. Yeah, completely. Total collusion, obviously, between the legal system there and the banking system. Yeah, it was spectacular. And in the final hearing, which is actually my appeal against the judgment that went against me, which also lasted another hour and a half of me defending myself and presenting a 1.5 hour defense, reading out countless, not countless, let me be realistic here, many arguments in case law and case law history and breach of law by the banks, probably presented about 30 legal arguments where the banks break the law, break the code of conduct, the bills and the acts that are prescribed to the banks. The judge did not question or cross-examine the bank on any of those accusations that are made. And when the bank was then given a chance to speak and respond, the advocate of the bank got very excited and very heated, which is quite interesting to see because he is one of the most senior advocates in the country. And he got all red in the face and spit was coming out of his mouth as he was talking at the top of his voice, accusing me of abusing the court and fanciful and unintelligible arguments and nonsensical arguments. And the judge not once stopped him and said, what do you mean by nonsensical? Because if you say nonsensical, that means it doesn't make sense to you, and unintelligible means that you don't understand it. So if you don't understand it, how can you argue against it?
Exactly.
I'm just giving you a silly example, but this is the job of the judge, right, to be impartial. And I was just accused of all these nonsensical and fanciful, unintelligible arguments, making things up as I go, and then he did what the whole court, and the courtroom was full of my supporters. There must have been close to 100 people. It wasn't a very big court, but still, there must have been close to 100 people in the court. And then the advocate did something that just completely blew everyone away, and he admitted to everything that I accused the bank of doing, and that is the fact that they have no money, the fact that they create money out of thin air, the fact that they create money out of fanciful bookkeeping entries, debits and credits, and the fact that they practice this thing called securitization, and the fact that they use our signatures to profiteer on us, the customers, based on the signatures and the documents that we sign. He admitted all this in one long sentence that he got very, very, very lost and overexcited. And as he said it, I looked at the judge and the whole court. You could feel the whole court looking at the judge, waiting for the judge finally to say, oh, Mr. Simon, his name is Shem Simon, the senior advocate. I find that interesting because I've just heard you admit that the bank is doing exactly what Mr. Tellinger is arguing that they do. So please explain to me how the bank generates money out of debits and credit entries in their bookkeeping system, because I'm fascinated by that. Please explain that to me. The judge did nothing. He just kept absolutely quiet, didn't cross-examine the bank, and proceeded by handing down a judgment against me, which happened in the following set of circumstances. When the bank finished speaking, he looked at me and said, do you have anything final to say? And I stood up and I said, well, they just admitted to everything I've been accusing them. And I looked back at the judge, and again, not a single response, as if I was talking to the wall. He might as well not have even been in a courtroom. And you could feel the sigh of confusion by, the full courtroom of people, complete disbelief that the judge could ignore that admission by the bank that they make money out of thin air and just let them get away with it. And then I said, well, they just admitted to everything I've been accusing them of. And the judge ignored that completely, and he said, right, thank you very much, I'm now going to read my judgment. And as he said that, he pulled a piece of paper in front of him, from which he proceeded to read his judgment. And that was just, what? You got a pre-written judgment on a piece of paper? The whole court went absolutely, you could hear the gasp, like, oh.
It's disturbing, Michael. It's totally disturbing. It's just want to scream at this point. But, all right, we will continue this discussion with Michael Tellinger and his landmark case against the banking system here on America Now after the top of the hour break. Stay with us. For too long, the banking giants have been untouchable, especially by the common citizen. Michael Tellinger's case is really important because he's challenging this banking system in the Constitutional Court. Everyone can be affected by this case because if Michael is successful, the repercussions will be widespread, and the global banking industry may be facing a radical overhaul through major public policy shifts and the changing of laws governing the banks. Here's hoping Michael is successful. Michael, when you left off, you weren't very successful, though, in those first few rounds in the Supreme Court. The judge ruled against you. And especially even after that advocate for the bank admitted everything that you were going up against the banking system about. So let's pick it up there and kind of bring it forward here to how it ended up where you are now with this case, and then maybe let's start getting into some of the solutions.
Right, thanks, Barbara. Okay, so it basically ended with another judgment against me where I was accused of abuse of the court and abusing the legal system. It was just spectacular. And the judgment went against me. They were going to execute my property, basically sell it at an auction. And this is, again, remember that the banks control that system as well. So now that you can't, and this happens to millions of people around the world on a daily basis. This is how they extort money out of people and then take back the property and resell it, gain all the money back that they never gave you in the first place, and entrap somebody else into the same bottomless pit of entrapment and debt that they create out of thin air. And this is just incredible. So that's what happened to me. So the judgment said that they were going to sell the property and hit me with a huge bill of expenses for the judges and the legal, all the costs. And so the only thing we could do at that stage was to basically say, hold on, we believe that my constitutional rights have been violated, which they clearly have. I have not been given a fair hearing. All I wanted to do all the way through my application was take it to a fair trial. I wasn't asking for a settlement from a bank or paying me out anything. All I wanted the judge to admit is that this is a very complex matter. It goes to the heart of the financial systems and the way that banks operate. The judge is not an expert on that at all, and that's the first thing the judge should have admitted. And all I wanted in my defense was to take it to a fair trial where we could get expert witnesses to come and testify to the accuracy of my alludements. And that was denied. I was denied a fair trial, which is denying me my constitutional right. And as I said earlier, the judge simply accepted at face value everything that the bank said as gospel truth and everything that I said as being lies and made up deceptive stories, trying to wangle my way out of debt. And therefore, my constitutional rights were violated and desecrated every step of the way. And instead of saying, I don't understand this, it's far too complex, we need to go to trial where we can bring in witnesses so I can cross-examine and ask these witnesses questions myself as the judge to really apply my mind. And remember that one of the things the judge has to do is to apply his mind correctly and actively and evaluate all the arguments and as many diverse arguments that have been brought into the case or into the court, and based on the evaluation of all the arguments, then make his assessment and his judgment. And that clearly did not take place here at all. I was denied a fair trial. So on that basis, then we then said, okay, the only other necessary step we have, the only other step we have is to petition the Constitutional Court. Now, South Africa is very proud of its constitution because it was really created by Nelson Mandela and a number of what they refer to as very smart people. I subsequently, having just come slightly face-to-face with the Constitutional Court at this stage, I already see a lot of very serious problems with the Constitutional Court and the way it operates. And once again, and I'm going to bring that up in my constitutional hearing, all these experiences that I have, I will bring up on behalf of the people, on behalf of the poor people, the uneducated, the illiterate people that would not stand a hope in hell to even petition the Constitutional Court. That process in itself, unless you're highly educated, you have skills and abilities, you have access to computers, you have access to the internet, and you have access to legal advice, you will never be able to even petition the Constitutional Court. That's how convoluted that system is. So even the process to apply to the Constitutional Court is filled with obstacles and hurdles that a normal person that lives in the country that doesn't have a clue about how the system works wouldn't even get through that process. So, yeah.
So, Michael, have you been getting a lot of assistance then in all of this regarding your case?
It's interesting because in the third court appearance, we finally had a lawyer that came out of the blue, and he was an attorney, a legal advisor for the South African police and the South African military for about 20 years. He's got a lot of experience, especially in a trial situation. He's a very strategic thinker, and he appeared miraculously and said, "Listen, I'm happy to help you guys and help you, and especially with the Constitutional Court issue." And his name is Raymond Dix. And so Raymond has really been a blessing that we received. And it was with Raymond's help that I was able to put together this 1,100 pages of argument and legal support and annexures and so forth. The actual court document, our arguments are about 110 pages, and the rest of it is just supporting material to support everything that we argue. And I think this is also a good time just to point out a few of the points, the legal points, so that your listeners understand where the banks break the law.
Sure.
And I know that in the United States there have been a few constitutional or a few landmark cases that the judges have judged in favor of the defendants, the people against the banks. Yes,
they have, Michael. We're going to head to a commercial break here. So when we come back, why don't you go ahead and tell us all about these legal points so that we can understand this case. And as well, if people are interested, you can go online and check all of this out at thebigcase.co.za. Z as in zebra, Z-A. All right, America Now continues with Michael Tellinger. I'm speaking with Michael Tellinger this evening about his landmark case against Standard Bank of South Africa, the Reserve Bank, and the Minister of Finance as well. And when we left off, Michael, you were going to inform us about some of those key legal points in the case against the banks.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara, and it's really important. And then I think we need to move into what are the solutions if all this goes in our favor and the laws get changed. And just also for some of your listeners to outline, the Constitutional Court in South Africa is the highest court. It makes the laws. And it is the instrument that guides all the other courts, all the judges take their leadership from the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court consists of 11 judges, that's the full bench, the 22 clerks that support them in research, and an additional number of researchers. I think there are about 6 additional researchers who are all senior advocates that help the judges in their research to reach conclusions so that they get informed about what the arguments are and reach conclusions that are accurate and totally and completely informed to the best of their ability, so that when they make a ruling, it is a ruling that will then affect the the entire law and legal system in the country. And if they decide in our favor that our arguments have merit and are accurate, that will basically mean a restructuring of the entire banking system and change the laws that govern banking. That's when you say it's a landmark case and a historic case. That's what it means. And you can imagine if the banking laws get changed in South Africa, which I believe they will because our arguments are absolutely solid in law, that means that the banks in South Africa won't be able to do business with foreign banks because their legal systems won't be able to connect. There'll be a mismatch, which will mean that other banks around the world will have to adapt their ways of doing business. And many people aren't aware of this, but the South African Reserve Bank is one of the most powerful banks in the world, basically because of the amount of precious metals that they control, all the gold and the platinum and the diamonds in the world. You can just imagine, just those three alone makes it an incredibly powerful bank. People, might look at South Africa as a small country at the bottom of Africa, but the control and the power that the South African Reserve Bank wields around the world is unbelievable. And this is something that people need to consider here. So a few of the laws that the banks break. The first and the most important one is very simple contract law. And contract law in every country is pretty much the same around the world because we have the same kind of legal systems, and contract law has evolved through the Illuminati and the bloodlines and the banking groups and those guys, and they've structured the same kind of laws. And the first law of contract law states that you can't lend something that you do not possess. Right?
They do it all the time, Michael.
They do it all the time. So our argument is that the bank has, in their contract and their home loan agreement that they sign with millions of people, they tell us that they're giving you a home loan and they're lending you money. Well, that is not true. They do not have that money that they lend you. And that is one of the admissions that the advocate made in court in front of the judge. He admitted the banks don't have money. They don't have vaults of money that most people imagine. And so how can you claim you're lending me something that you do not have? So that means you're in breach of contract law. And that's the most important and first breach. So if you don't have something that you're lending me, how can you make me sign a contract and telling me that you're lending me something? So and confusing me into believing that you're lending me something and forcing me to sign a contract, and at the same time put up the property in question so that if I default, you then take the property as security. There are a whole number of other issues related to that, but people can download the entire argument on the website that you mentioned, thebigcase.co.za, and you can download the entire argument because once it goes to the Constitutional Court, it's public domain. Anyone can request a copy of it or read it so that everyone is totally au fait and it's totally transparent with everybody. And secondly, once you've signed the offer to purchase a home or a car or anything with a bank, they then take that document, that offer to purchase, which in banking terms is called a promissory note, with your signature on it, and they go and trade that on the international stock markets. In South Africa, they deal with companies known as SPVs, or special purpose vehicles, or special purpose companies, who then take and buy this, bundle these documents together, and they sell it on to, they're like an intermediary, and they sell it on to the South African Reserve Bank, who buys it from the banks, and they then sell it on to, I believe they sell it on to the DTCC, the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation in New York, which is this weird monster that just creates money out of thin air and buys and sells stocks from banks all over the world. just creates money out of thin air as well all the time. And so the bank uses the signatures of their customers to go and generate money on the international stock market, and they sell your promissory note on average for 3 times its value. So if you're buying a house for $1 million or R1 million, they on average get about R3 million in return when they sell your promissory note. They never disclose that information to you as their customer. So they profiteer on your signature. They do not act as a lender. They act as an intermediary. So there's already 3 areas of deception and breaking the bank law, the Bank Act, the Fiduciary Responsibility Act, whatever that act is named, that act is called. There are all these acts and laws and codes of conduct that they break. So you can see how deceitful this thing is. And by selling on your promissory note to a third company, they lose all title to the house or the property, and they have no place to, or no right to bring this action against you as the home owner or the lender, or the borrower. They have no right to bring action against you because they've lost title to the property or to the contract.
Yeah, they have. It's really disgusting, Michael, but it's practiced globally. All right, we will continue this discussion with Michael Tellinger here on America Now. Michael Tellinger is challenging the global banking system, and we hope he's successful, because if he is, things will change in our favor and we will be more empowered. Again, if you want more information about this case, it's thebigcase.co.za, and you can also check out Michael's website as well. It's michaeltellinger.com. Michael, when we left off, you were talking about the codes of conduct all being broken by these banks on a daily basis. And if you're successful with this case, things really will change. And then we're going to need some solutions. So I'm going to let you pick it up there.
Yeah, I think the first solution is a great example that has been set in Iceland. And many of your listeners will probably be familiar with this. What I find fascinating is that the mainstream media has not picked up at all on what happened in Iceland,
right.
Where the people basically marched on the parliament and demanded a referendum. They forced the government to resign and appointed new leaders, and basically forced the banks to close down and the central bank to close down, and they set up a new people's bank that belongs to the people, and they told all the foreign, international, multinational corporations that had enslaved the Icelandic people, said, sorry, that debt that you say is ours does not belong to us. It belongs to the people who own the banks. They created that debt on our behalf and enslaved us. We don't want anything to do with it. Talk to the bankers, let them worry about the debt, and basically told them to go stuff themselves. We're not going to pay your debt. And I believe that's the correct way to do things, because the bankers are creating debt behind our backs. We don't know anything about it. And then they enslave the people of the United States, of every country of the world, and the government is in cahoots with it, with these activities, and allows it to carry on. And it's for that reason that I also implicate the South African Minister of Finance in my lawsuit, because he's been observing this going on. He knows what's going on behind our backs, and he's allowed the banks, in cahoots with the central bank, the South African Reserve Bank, to perpetrate these exploitative tactics against the people.
So, Michael, the solutions then? What kind of solutions will we... Yeah.
The solutions are, first of all, I need to remind people of our inalienable rights, because we are such a divided species, and this is, the reason I'm doing this is because of my research into origins of humankind. Who are we as a species? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And realizing that we're a slave species to some advanced beings who came to Earth looking for gold, and they found it in large numbers, in huge quantities, especially here in southern Africa. And the obsession with gold has been going on for nearly 300,000 years as far as the human race is concerned. But in my research into the origins of humankind, as we mentioned earlier, I found that money was maliciously introduced as a tool of enslavement and a tool of control. So what are our human rights and our inalienable rights? At the moment, our inalienable rights are all the things around us that we have forgotten because of our enslaved mentality and the fact that we are so poisoned by capitalism and poisoned by consumerism and the shiny metal and the glitz and glamour around us, that we forgot what our rights are. Our rights are very basic. The country belongs to the people. The country belongs to its people. The land belongs to its people. We have appointed our leaders and the government as our servants to do the best that they can for us, the people. That's their job. The government is the servant of the people, not the enslaver or the slave master of the people. So the land belongs to the people, the water belongs to the people, the minerals in the ground belong to the people, whether it's gold, platinum, or diamonds, or coal, or oil. The airwaves belong to the people, the rivers, the mountains, and the coastlines belong to the people, not to the government or any corporation that has laid claim to it. Now, just by really internalizing those few fundamentals, you realize how twisted and convoluted the system has become, and how the governments of the world have completely turned the situation around. And instead of being the servants of the people and doing the best they can for the greater benefit of the people, they have done the opposite. They do what they can for themselves in cahoots with the large multinational corporations and the small few banking families and those that run the mining institutions around the world. Those are the guys that are working in cahoots with the governments to keep the people enslaved. That becomes very obvious. So you've got to remind people of the inalienable rights. And then you've got to remind people of the fact that money is an artificially created, synthetically created tool of enslavement that was imposed on humanity as a tool of control. So, if that is the case, how do we break that control, that cycle, never-ending cycle of control? If money is the hurdle to all progress and the tool of enslavement, the answer is very simple. It's staring us in the face. Remove money. If you remove money, in that instant, in that split second, you remove all the control of those multinational groups and the governments that have enslaved the people. Because if you can't enslave the people with money, you have no tool to enslave the people with. And anything else that has been presented to the world will fail as long as we have money, because money ultimately is the highest form of control. So,
Michael, I agree with you totally, but how would we go about removing money from society? It's so intrinsic.
It is intrinsic, but let me remind your listeners once again, money does nothing. People, when you say remove money, people immediately go into shock mode and say, oh my goodness, how are things going to work? How are we going to pay for things? Just listen to yourself when you say that. How are we going to pay for things? How are things going to work? Well, things work all the time, every day. Billions of people get up and they do things. It's not money. Money does not plow the fields. Money does not grow the food. Money does not build the bridges or make the rockets or design solutions for new energy. Money does nothing. Money is just the hurdle to progress and the obstacle to progress and abundance. People do things. People plow the land. People grow food. People come up with solutions. People build the bridges. People are the instrument of change, not money. Money is just the hurdle to progress. Money is the tool of enslavement that keeps people running around in circles and preventing them from attaining solutions. And so, if you take money out the system, the immediate thing that happens, there's no gluttony, there's no greed, there's no crime. The biggest problem in the world, crime. All crime, and I can tell you this categorically, and I know that there are arguments like, crimes of passion and crimes of insanity that get thrown, and if we had more time, I would explain to you how that gets solved in a world without money. If you remove money, there's no, as you said yourself right at the beginning, no crime, no envy, no gluttony, no greed, no hoarding, all these ugly aspects of society, this divided society that has been divided on so many levels based on hierarchy, and money is the tool of division.
Yes, it is. All right, we will continue this discussion with Michael Tellinger after this break. My guest this evening has been Michael Tellinger, and he's been talking about his landmark case as well now as solutions for taking back the power from the politicians and governments, and solutions that we, the people, empowering ourselves, can remove money and our enslavement. And Michael, I'm just going to let you roll and let you finish up here and go ahead and talk about contributionism.
Thank you, Barbara. Like we said before the break, it's not money that does things around the world. It's people that do things around the world. Now, what money does, it really provides the ceiling to and the obstacle to all progress. So once you remove money, you now have unlimited and unbridled abundance on all levels. Clearly, we are completely trapped in a society that thinks about money, and people wonder, how are you going to break out of that? Now, I call it contributionism, as you mentioned, and in Africa there's an ancient system called Ubuntu contributionism, where everybody in the community contributes their natural skills or talents towards the greater benefit of all. And many of the Native American population and the Native American people have similar belief systems, and as well in Africa. And that belief is that if it's not good for everyone, it's no good at all. We're constantly told we are born equal, but from the moment you're born until you die, we are all deeply separated and segregated. And once again, money is the cause of all that. So the moment you remove money, you level the playing field. And how is it going to work? Well, it's not going to work in a flash. We have to work and move towards a moneyless society. And that will begin with small towns and small villages where people start working together towards working as a unified field and a unified force, a unified group of people that start taking back taking the control and creating their own free energy and creating their own farming produce where they provide for themselves and start providing for those outside of their own community, but creating building materials and solutions with building materials and so forth. But these are the stepping stones that I outlined very carefully and very clearly in my contributionism plan of action. But it's just the philosophy about it is really important, because you need to realize that the things we do today are totally caught up in chasing money. So we spend probably 90% of our energy and all our time every day through our lives chasing money. Everything we do is towards getting some money in so we can live. So the moment you stop chasing money and you start contributing with your natural talents or your acquired skills to the greater benefit of all people in your community, the community that you choose to live in, you realize that suddenly you're producing, and you're producing tremendously towards towards the greater benefit of everyone in your community, not just yourself. And there can be no better reward for you as a member of your community than the acknowledgement of others in your community for what it is that you do and what you contribute, and the community honoring you for your contribution. No amount of money can buy that kind of honor and respect. Money forces honor and respect on people because it subjugates them. So you turn this thing around completely. Suddenly you have every slave worker, everybody that's got a job in a company or a factory or a shoe factory, the Nike slave factory that employ thousands of people for no money, no remuneration. Suddenly everybody becomes a shoemaker in their own right. And we go back to really applying our skills and enjoying life. And some people will think, well, if you take money out of the system, does it mean we're going back to the caves, going back to the dark ages? No, it means the opposite. Because suddenly there's an unbridled abundance of farming, of food production, of rocket science, of engineering, of new ideas and inventions that are not limited because there's not enough money. So suddenly it opens up all the areas of possibility in every aspect of life and society, in the sciences, in the agriculture, in community, and it is the most exciting and beautiful thing to experience once that penny drops for you. Once you get over the fear that if we have no money, how are we going to do things? Well, if we have no money or the need for money, and everybody does what they love. What people wake up in the morning with a smile on their face because they know they're going to do what they love to do. And can you imagine? Remember that everything is just energy. The whole world and everything we do is based on energy. The kind of positive energy that'll filter through the world once people start doing that. It is spectacular, and that energy rubs off on everybody else around you, as opposed to the negative energy that we wake up with today. Billions of people wake up in misery every day, not knowing how they're going to get out of this gloomy tunnel. Is there a solution at the end of the gloomy tunnel of misery and hardship? Yes, there is. And that solution is get rid of money, embrace the concept of contributionism in your society, in your town or your village, and start working towards that consciousness, that unity consciousness that everybody works together towards the greater benefit of all. And it's a beautiful, beautiful mindset to get into, and I get so excited when I start talking about this because the solutions are so simple, and I can tell you every one of your listeners has the answers in them already. All you have to repeat: there's no money, no barter, no trade, no value greater or lesser attributed to anything, because each one of us is infinitely valuable with who we are and what we contribute. And the moment you start segregating that value, you start creating separation. And I must remind your listeners.
Yeah, Michael, when you're talking... Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, I was going to say, and all of this too, Michael, when you're talking about the unity, this harmony, you're really getting this back, the Ubuntu, but it's back to the idea we are all one. It puts us back to that whole spiritually based higher consciousness as well.
That's exactly, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because we are in 2012 after all. We are going through rapid enlightenment, rapid rise of consciousness around the world. It's happening on a staggering level. So we got to do something with that rise of consciousness, and we're going to turn this thing around and say we don't need money. And the moment you say we don't need money, you realize how beautifully things fall into place. And clearly we're going to have to get rid of money and the control systems. And in a way force a transitional period where certain steps get taken and certain steps get implemented. We can't go from this totally enslaved society to a society without money at all. But I believe that there are 2 or 3 or 4 steps of transition that'll take us rapidly over the next 5 years or so And I think this can happen really quickly. The more we rise in consciousness and in unity consciousness, the quicker we realize how simple this actually is. It is the obvious questions like, who's going to shovel the rubbish, and who's going to do the menial jobs, and if there's no money and everything is for free, can I just sit on my backside and do nothing and people will bring things to me? No, that's not how it works. Because when you do what you love, you wake up and you're passionate about what it is that you do. Remember, we're infinitely creative souls. Each one of us has something that we're passionate about, and we have been prevented from doing that through our entire life, our education system, and the entire job system, and the whole way the careers are structured. Get a career, get a good job. That's what we're told all our lives. Well, those are the lies and deceptions. We should be promoting from the earliest childhood the natural talent and the passions that are instilled in us, the God-given talents that we are denied from following and pursuing throughout our lives, and rather forced to chase money so we can pay the bills. And that's the subtle twist and the subtle change. It is so subtle that some people miss it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Michael, and all the best to you. I want to hear how this goes. Keep me informed. And again, everybody, it's thebigcase.co.za, or you can check it out at michaeltellinger.com.